Welcome to Slacker Sports Show.
Good evening, sports fans, and welcome back to another podcast episode of Slacker Sports Show, where we discuss the AFC North football division, and we're going to just jump right into it. Let's introduce Mark.
Hey everybody, good to be back. Finished up all our NFC division previews. If you haven't listened to those, go back and check those out, but excited to be talking about all of the divisions in the AFC for the next couple weeks here.
Yeah, and so we're trying to get these done before the season starts. So we're going to get started with the Baltimore Ravens, who finished 14-2 last year. Pretty much the only other team that was, I guess, great, so to speak. I feel like the AFC kind of had two great teams. It didn't really work out for them in the playoffs, but they had a 14-2 record, which I believe is the best record in all of the NFL. And so, yeah, they're good. They're returning pretty much everyone from last year, especially at the big positions. But I think the biggest name to talk about is the quarterback, Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, and it kind of be interesting to see how he follows up his MVP season from last year. Yeah, Lamar Jackson's, if he's anything like he was last year, he's the key to unlocking what this team could do. And this is one of the most well-rounded teams, top to bottom, offense, defense, and special teams in the league. I'm not going to pull a Colin Cowherd and say they're going 16-0, but I could see them having a similar season this year. And just to kind of, one way to look at Lamar Jackson's impact is fantasy. We try to bring that up every once in a while. We both are part of a fantasy league, and we'll be bringing you more content on that end as that gets closer. But either Lamar or Patrick Mahomes are number one in quarterback rankings on most platforms, whether you use ESPN or Yahoo. It's usually either Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes as the number one quarterback. And the thing for him on fantasy is he adds that running factor. He adds points on the ground, which is really, really valuable for fantasy quarterbacks. We talked about it in another one of our podcasts, but Josh Allen is a surprising fantasy player just because he has that running factor. So that's one thing Lamar has that maybe sets him apart from Patrick Mahomes, or maybe something he focuses his game around a little bit more. But he's got an MVP season to follow up with, and we'll see if he gets close to that again. His impact on the field outside of fantasy, I mean, it's kind of tied together, but if you want some solid numbers, their offense was about tops in the league in every category. Passing is where they struggle, and I'll talk about that a little bit, but offense, they were second in total yards per game, first in rushing yards per game by over 60 yards, which if you're looking at averages and something is a 60-yard gap, that's huge. Maybe not game to game, that wouldn't be surprising comparing two teams, but to be 60 yards average over the next best team is mind-blowing. And then they're also first in points scored per game. So their offense was great last year, and they do struggle passing. They were 27th in the league in total passing yards, but really they didn't seem like they needed it last year. Their running game is just so well-rounded with Lamar Jackson, Mark Ingram, some of the backups at the running back position that really they didn't need as much passing last year. I think they averaged about 200 yards right around there passing, but if they can add a passing dimension, and Lamar's been working on it this offseason, then their offense could be even better than last year, and it's already great. So it'll be something to watch going forward, how their offense either stays the same or changes this year.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing, and you kind of said it earlier, they had an average of 60 more yards than everybody else. And that is honestly, most of it is just Lamar Jackson, because I think he ran, I would say, for at least 60 yards every single game. So that's that extra 60 yards the other teams don't have, because other teams don't have the quarterback like Lamar Jackson. And I think this comes back to the biggest concern, and that's for most every team, is keeping Lamar Jackson safe and healthy. If he gets injured, this team instantly goes from a 14-2 team down to like an 8-8 team. And that's kind of the same with a lot of teams. If they lose their best player at quarterback, it's going to change how they perform. But this one's big because Lamar Jackson is known for a runner, which means he will be taking more hits than just an average quarterback. And that's kind of always been a problem in the NFL. We got these great college quarterbacks that come up that are really fast, and they want to run options, and they take the hits in college, and they're fine, and everything's great. And then they get up to the NFL, and it's a completely different story. A lot of the rushers get injured early on and never really have a career, or then all they're good at is running, and they can't throw. So the biggest thing for me this year will be to see if Lamar Jackson can actually set back in the pocket more and kind of not do the instinctive thing to run. Kind of look over your things and as a last thing run. And that's kind of what the Chiefs did with Patrick Mahomes. Not that he's a runner, but I remember the first season they drafted him. They had to kind of break him away because in college, when the pocket would break down, you could just run and you're fine. NFL's not that way. NFL linebackers run as fast, if not faster, than quarterbacks do. So they can chase you down from anywhere on the field and get to you. College is a little bit different story. You're kind of just, if you're a quarterback that's quick, you're just a straight athlete. You can probably outrun most linebackers in the college. But here, you can't do that, and you have to really just use it as a last resort to run. And Lamar didn't really do that last year. They ran plays just for him to run, but that's something that Mahomes worked on after his first season, was not running right away, but taking your time and kind of looking at your passer. You look through the passing progression, try to find someone. If all breaks down and you're about to get sacked, then try to get outside the pocket. But even then, get outside the pocket and look to pass until you have no other option, and then to run. And I just worry that Lamar is going to fall into that group of quarterbacks that's come up from college and just, kind of been running as their thing. But the thing that Lamar Jackson does have over a lot of other quarterbacks that do try to run is Lamar Jackson can also throw very well. So if he can really, really drill down into throwing and reading coverages and all that, he is going to be a quarterback kind of just like Patrick Mahomes, who's going to get that huge deal. Got to stay healthy now and stay on the field to get that.
Hopefully John Harbaugh, who's one of the better coaches in the league, can kind of drill it into him that he needs to maybe rely on his passing a little bit more. They have I think Greg Roman's their offensive coordinator. They have a great offensive play calling team there. And one thing that sets Baltimore apart from a lot of other teams is that they have basically a top 5 defense as well. I won't spend a lot of time on their defense, but they're 4th in total yards allowed, 6th in passing yards allowed, 5th in rushing yards allowed, and 3rd in points allowed. So about every category you'd want to be leading in on defense, the Baltimore Ravens are good at. And they may not have a first ballot Hall of Famer like Ray Lewis anymore, but they got some solid names that everybody's heard of: Earl Thomas, Marcus Peters, Calais Campbell, that really set the tone. And then Patrick Queen, who was a rookie. He's a linebacker from LSU that was towards the bottom of the first round, I believe, but a lot of people who report on the NFL are really high on him. So their defense really is there to back up their offense and kind of bolster what the offense is already doing. So I can see them having another great season if everybody stays healthy.
Yeah, and speaking about defenses, you've known the Pittsburgh Steelers to have a lot of great defenses in the past, and their defense isn't going to be that bad this year. What I am worried about is their offense and how their offense is going to do this year. Rothelisberger, their quarterback, obviously injured all the time, basically, and how much longer can he play before it's just enough is enough? He's played through a lot of injuries in his career. Mad props to him, but when's enough for Ben Roethlisberger?
Yeah, he's in that class with like Tom Brady and Drew Brees where they're still performing, but it would not surprise too many people if they all started to drop off just due to age and racking up injuries. So I'm concerned with their offense as well. They were bottom 10 in about every category you care about last year. And some of that is Roethlisberger's injury. I mean, even hurt, he's better than a lot of their backups. Duck Hodges, I think, was their main guy they stuck with. But James Conner, I'm a little bit concerned about. He kind of had a disappointing season last season. If he can return to what he was a couple years ago, that'll be a huge boost for their offense. And then they also signed Eric Ebron, tight end. I believe was with the Colts last year. So that adds another weapon for him. But I don't know how much more Big Ben has in the tank and what he can do this season. If he comes back and can be the 4,000-yard passer he's been before, then they have a chance to win the wild card. I don't think they'll win the division, but they have a chance to be a wild card team. If he's hurt again or they can't find a good backup, then this could be another disappointing kind of middle of the year season for Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and they went 8-8 last year, which isn't, I mean, it's middle of the road, but for the Steelers, that's not great. But yeah, I mean, they kind of got there, and it was just weird because it's like, well, they don't really have a good quarterback. Their running back's not playing very well, and a lot of James Conner's down year was because teams were just loading the box because they didn't have a quarterback to out-throw anybody. So basically they could just stack the box against Conner and hold him in there. And so I think when Big Ben comes back and if he could stay healthy, I think Conner is going to definitely open up in the backfield just because they won't be stacking the box like they did last year. And another big name that had another down year was Smith-Schuster. Basically nothing from him. He had like 1 or 2 good weeks and then absolutely nothing the rest of the season. And that kind of goes back to Big Ben as well, just not having a good quarterback. You can't, even the greatest wide receivers, if they don't have a good quarterback or at least a decent quarterback, they're not going to do anything for that year. So, and kind of like what you said, their backup quarterback was awful, to put it slightly. I mean, sometimes you get those backups like in New England when Tom Brady got hurt and Garoppolo came up and did all this stuff. And that just wasn't the case in Pittsburgh. They went from a B guy down to an F guy, and they just didn't have anybody else better. So not a lot of teams actually have the second quarterback as good as the first or even remotely close to as good as the first, but it definitely showed last year in Pittsburgh. And the fact that they won 8 games was a miracle. But, yeah, they signed Eric Ebron, who's a good tight end if he could stay healthy. Again, injuries everywhere. And their defense is kind of the good thing they had last year. And they got some good players, T.J. Watt, who's J.J. Watt's brother. And he's starting to become one of the best linebackers in the league. He's playing like his brother at linebacker, which is scary to think of. I think, is TJ Watt like 25 now? He's low 20s.
He's relatively young.
Yeah, so he's got a lot of years left, which will be fun to see him. And then they got Fitzpatrick in their secondary. And then, I mean, their defense was just good, it seemed like, all year long.
Yeah, I was really surprised when I looked up their statistics. I mean, I knew that Fitzpatrick was there, and a lot of people are really high on him. But I guess maybe I didn't hear about it as much as other defenses last year, but they were 5th in total yards allowed, 3rd in passing yards allowed. Their rush defense is where they struggle, and I don't even know if I'd say that because they were still top half of the league in rushing yards allowed, and then 6th in points allowed. So if their offense can get going, they could be another solid, well-rounded team in this division, but I just have some questions about their offense, and like we talked about with the Bears and a couple other teams, a good defense can only take you so far if you don't have much going on offense. So I don't think the defense is the question mark this year. I think it's going to be the offense and Big Ben's health.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And going on to the next people in the league, the Cleveland Browns, who finished 6-10 last year, which I feel like they didn't even do that well. So I don't know. It was kind of like the Steelers. How did they finish 8-8? I don't know how Cleveland Browns actually won 6 games last year, but the record says 6-10, so we're going to go with it. They do have a new coach. I'm not even going to say his last name because I don't know what it is. Do you know what it is?
It's Kevin Stefanski coming over from the Vikings. No more Freddie Kitchens.
Yep, no more Kitchens in Cleveland, and Cleveland just seems to change every year. They seem to it's weird. Cleveland seems to be the team that tries to make all these moves and blockbuster moves, but they're just awful. They're just awful moves. They try to bring in these great players, and they just lay eggs. And I don't think it's the players. I think it's the office. I think it's the coaching staff. I think it's, I don't know. They bring in good players. They sign players for long-term contracts, and then nothing happens to the Cleveland Browns. And is it going to be that again this year, Mark?
I'm not really sure. They're a team that I don't know how I'm going to predict them. I'll come up with something by the end of this episode, but they're just a team that you could see going 10 or 11 wins, or they could be back at 6-10. I mean, they don't seem like there's a lot of middle ground for them. They're either going to be playoff caliber or towards the bottom of the league, and they're one of those teams that, like you said, they try to make a lot of splashy moves, and everybody was on the hype train last year going in and thought they were going to win the division and beat the Ravens and the Steelers, and then they had this disappointing 6-10 season. And there's still some analysts out there that are getting back on the hype train this year and think they may do something again. But I think it's kind of a make it or break it year for maybe not the franchise, but a lot of their key pieces or people they've invested a lot into. Baker Mayfield had a disappointing year last year, and I think I drafted him pretty early on in our fantasy draft, so that was a big whiff for me. But I think it's kind of a make it or break it year for him. See what you got with him and what he can do. They do have a solid group of receivers and skill position players. I mean, Odell Beckham Jr. is the headliner, and he had a solid year last year. Jarvis Landry's still there. Nick Chubb, who had an okay season last year. I think people were expecting more from him. He was kind of one of those guys that people before last year were expecting to maybe be like the number 1 overall fantasy running back, and that didn't really pan out. And then he's got Kareem Hunt as his backup. And then they did pick up Austin Hooper, who I believe played for the Falcons last year as a tight end. He was statistically one of the better tight ends in the league, so that adds another dimension for them. And then they have David Njoku behind him, who's another guy who's struggled with injuries. But they have the weapons to have a good offense, but it'll be on to Baker to see what they can do with all these weapons.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing is that I feel like Cleveland takes some very, very hefty risks, except they never pan out for them. Baker Mayfield kind of being – I mean, they've had plenty of people there that it's happened to, but, yeah, the Baker Mayfield hype train came in and they thought they were going to be great, and, all of these NFL analysts were saying, oh, yeah, they're going to be good now, and I just didn't understand it because Baker Mayfield hasn't proven anything in the NFL yet, so – I don't know why it was all big last year. I think a lot of people thought Nick Chubb was really going to be good, like really good, and that Baker Mayfield would have kind of time to figure it out, but that was not the case whatsoever. Baker Mayfield just never had time to figure it out because Nick Chubb, he played well, but that offensive line wasn't as good as they thought it was going to be, and so he didn't really get those big games until late on in the season. There was a few games where he did well, but yeah, the biggest thing is going to be whether or not Baker Mayfield knows how to throw a football now, or if he's still going to just kind of go out there and throw it and see if his receivers come up with it. OBJ did have a good season, but comparatively to him, not a good season at all. I mean, he did. I don't know what he finished as a wide receiver rank, but usually OBJ is that top 3 wide receiver. He definitely was not that last year. So we'll have to wait and see what they can do. The Austin Hooper trade, I know a lot of people are making a big deal about it, but I don't think Austin Hooper is any better than Njoku, and that's because Austin Hooper came from the Atlanta Falcons where they use their tight end. And they use their tight. I mean, no matter who they've had there, they've used their tight end. And there's some teams that are like that. You look at the New Orleans Saints; they use their tight end no matter who it is. Jimmy Graham was there. He was one of the best tight end in the games. They move him away from there, and he's done nothing since. And then they bring in who'd they have? Like last couple of years, they've had. I can't think of who they had. Yeah, they've had Jared Cook, and, I mean, he's kind of already been through his main career, basically, and they bring in Cook, and now he's taken off. So I think Austin Hooper isn't as good as a pickup as everyone wants to see it as. I think a lot of it's just going to be based on the scheme. I mean, you look at some great teams that have great tight ends, and it's because they use their tight ends as pass catchers. They don't use them just as blockers. It's not necessarily the fact that they've got this best tight end in the game. They just use them. And there's a lot of teams that have really good tight ends, and they just don't use them. And then there's also some teams that use their tight ends that don't have very good tight ends, but because of the scheme they make them work. So this offense, I have no idea what to expect, and you kind of said it. You kind of said it best. They could either be a playoff team or they could just flop like they did last year. And with everything going on and everything happening, I don't think the Cleveland Browns are going to have it this year, especially with a brand new head coach. I just don't see it. I mean, the talent's there. I'm just worried about what they put on the field. They can have all the big names in the world, and they still can't play on the field. It's not going to matter. And their defense is kind of the same way, I feel like. They got all these big names, and it's kind of like, well, what are they going to do with it? One of the big names is Myles Garrett coming back from a suspension. And so, like, what is he going to do? Is he going to do anything this year, or what's going to happen with that defense, Mark?
Yeah, I'm not really sure what to expect with them. Myles Garrett is getting some Defensive Player of the Year buzz from NFL analysts. He's got the talent to do that, but I don't know how much the suspension affected him and if he'll play any different. And then they just don't have as well-rounded as a defense as the two teams we've already talked about, the Ravens and the Steelers. So I think they're needing a couple more pieces on that side of the ball to really be a well-rounded team that could be a division winner. So their defense doesn't impress me as much as a couple other teams in their own division.
And speaking of their division, nice segue, the last team in the division who did the worst last year at 2-14 is the Cincinnati Bengals. But don't worry, they drafted Joe Burrow.
Yeah, and question for me is, will he play early? Looks like so far during training camp he is. And what can he be? Is he going to be Rookie of the Year? Is he going to struggle? I saw a lot of people today questioning the Bengals offensive line and if they can protect him, if he'll make it through the whole year. So Joe Burrow had a fantastic year in college last season, won the Heisman, went from probably being second round or later to the first overall pick. So it'll be interesting to see if he can continue what he's doing in college into the pros, if he was just a flash in the pan and then drops off once he gets to be a professional, or if he can really light a spark under them. And then one of his targets that I'm interested in, another rookie, is T. Higgins that went to Clemson. Last year in college, he had over 1,100 yards and 13 touchdowns, so had some production in college. Could be a kind of a sleeper as far as the rookie class. I know there was 3 main rookies at the top, rookie wide receivers going in the draft. There was 3 main guys everybody's focused on, but T. Higgins could be a steal, and whether Joe Burrow pans out or not, if they bring in another quarterback, I think T. Higgins could be a guy that really sticks around and has a long career. And then another receiver that everybody kind of doesn't know what will happen with him is A.J. Green. He's been one of the better receivers in the league for a long time, but really hasn't done much the past couple of years. He's missed 23 of the team's last 24 games and 29 overall since the start of the 2016 season. So to put that into perspective, he's missed almost 2 full seasons worth of games since the start of the 2016 season. Last year, he tore multiple ankle ligaments in the preseason, didn't even get a play during the regular season last year. So does A.J. Green have anything left? Can he still be productive? Or is he just too beat up and getting too far up there in years to really do anything? What do you think?
The biggest thing I have about this team is, yes, they got the first overall pick, but there's a reason they got the first overall pick, and I don't necessarily think it was their quarterback play. I think the team as a whole is just not strong anymore. When back in the day when they had A.J. Green full strength, they had one of the best wide receivers in the league with A.J. Green, and I mean they were good then. They had running backs, everything. Now I feel like their team has nothing and they need to start basically from the bottom, and I think that's what they're doing with Joe Burrow. Now they got their quarterback of the future. Now it's time to go out and get some wide receivers for him to throw to. T. Higgins could be one of them. I think he does have a bright future ahead of him. He's a really good wide receiver on that Clemson team. So we'll wait and see what they do. As far as this year, I just don't see them doing much better, if any better, than 2-14. But that might actually work to their advantage. That way they can come back, get another really good, first-round pick next year. And I think I'd have to look into it, but I think the Bengals have a bunch of draft picks either in this year's or next year's draft. Just kind of they've been saving up, and so I think what they're doing is straight rebuilding. They got that number 1 overall pick with Burrow. Now they're going to go out and try to get all of the other pieces that they need to try to make a playoff run again. But I don't think AJ Green is going to really do anything the rest of his career. I just think he's been injured too much. I think that if anything, if history's shown us, he might play a good couple of games and then be injured the rest of the season. It's not someone I would want to build my team around. It's not someone I would think, hey, we're going to for sure have this guy every single week, so let's, game plan around him. Don't think it's going to happen with AJ Green. I think a lot of what's going on now is the fact that AJ Green's been there for forever, basically, so they want him to retire as a Bengal, so they're not going to they're not going to cut him or anything. I don't think they could. But I think the Bengals have a lot of work to do, and I don't think just because they have Joe Burrow that will make them an instant good team to even contend for the playoffs or anything. I don't think some teams, one player fitting in would be all that team needs to go forward. But this team is broken in so many ways. So you look at their defense. They had a worse defense. In the worst defense in rushing. They just didn't have a good defense either. They just have so many things that need to be fixed. Yes, they're going in the right direction. They got their quarterback of the future, but they still got a lot more to do here in the next couple of years if they actually want to make that playoff push.
Yeah, I agree with you that they're on the right track, but have a lot of pieces they need to add. I could see the Bengals, if you look up in 5 years and they're good, I wouldn't be surprised if Joe Burrow is what everybody thinks he is. But you're right, they need to keep drafting, they need to keep stocking up and getting young pieces, young productive guys. And when they get enough of those guys, they can start making the climb up. But right now, like you said, they're hurting at so many positions that it's going to take some maneuvering and drafting and maybe making some trades here and there to get them to even be a team that's in the playoff race. So if you talk to me again in 5 years and they're good, I wouldn't be surprised. But they need to round out that team. And Joe Burrow, as good as he was last year, he's not going to be able to come in and swing the fortune of the franchise this quick.
All right, and especially in the NFL. It's one thing for someone to come into college and completely change a program. It's another thing to do that in the NFL, where everyone in the NFL is there because they are one of the best at their position. You think of college and your quarterback plays really, really good and does all this great stuff, but the competition he plays isn't as good as what he can perform. You go to the NFL where you play the best competition every single week. It's a lot different. Same thing with like the NBA. You got all these great college stars that come in and they're supposed to be this awesome, and then they just don't do anything in the NBA because everybody in the NBA, everybody in the NFL is on top of their game or is one of the best in the world. That's what So it's hard to say that Joe Burrow is going to have a good career. We're hoping for it just because, Joe Burrow seems like a stand-up fella. But I think that we're going to learn a lot in his next couple of years. But Cincinnati's got to add people around him. They got to get an offensive line that's young and can protect him. Otherwise, Joe Burrow is going to be injured in 2 years and his career's done. So not something you want to invest in if you're not going to protect him. If you're not going to protect your quarterback, don't invest in a quarterback. And so them investing in a quarterback, hopefully this next season or this next draft, they can come in and get some people around him to keep him safe, keep him healthy, so that in 5 years they actually can do that and make a playoff run. So let's end the episode by going over our predictions for the year. Again, last year, Baltimore Ravens were 14-2 in first, 8-8 Pittsburgh Steelers in second, Cleveland Browns 6-10 in third, and the Bengals 2-14 in last place. What do you got, Mark?
I think as long as Lamar Jackson stays healthy, Ravens could be close to what they were last year. I don't know if they'll win 14 games. They may try to rest people towards the end of the season, but I think they're kind of head and shoulders above everybody else in this division. So I have them in first. They're just so well-rounded that their defense can help them out when they need to. Lamar can do everything he does. So I have the Baltimore Ravens first. 2 and 3 are kind of a toss-up for me. If the Browns do as well as everybody thinks they might, I could see them being the second-place team. But like we said, there's a lot of questions for them, and their defense isn't on par with the Steelers or the Ravens. Pittsburgh, they have the questions with Big Ben and everything. I think I'll take Pittsburgh second. Just been burned by Cleveland too many times, and Pittsburgh's defense is a lot more well-rounded, so I think I'll pick them second. Cleveland, I could see them, like I said, pushing for 8-8 or maybe pushing for a playoff spot, but there's just a lot of questions there, so I have them in third. And then Cincinnati, like we said, they still have a lot of pieces they need to pick up, so they're in fourth for me. What about you?
I got basically the same. I got Ravens in first. I think, again, yeah, they're going to have a great career or a great year for sure. Well, I won't say for sure, but I'm seeing them 10, 12 wins easily if Lamar Jackson can stay healthy, and that's the big if. And he stayed healthy last year, but you guys have to realize it only takes one hit to basically change his whole career. One hit of a concussion, and now they have concussion problems, or one hit and, a broken leg or something, and it just changes completely their whole career. So if he could stay healthy, I think Baltimore Ravens, like you said, just well beyond better than anybody else in this league. And then second and third, I kind of have a switch up from you. I think Cleveland will do better. I don't think Cleveland will do great. I think they'll finish like 8-8. Or 9-7 or something like that. But I don't think Pittsburgh is going to win as many games as they did last year. I don't think Big Ben has anything left in the tank. And I think it's going to be just a lot of kind of what it was last year with them stacking the box with Connor and Smith-Schuster getting irritated because a quarterback can't give them the ball. And I don't know. I see Cleveland finishing in second above the Pittsburgh Steelers, and then the Pittsburgh Steelers in third, and then rounding it out is the Bengals. And almost what I want to see with the Bengals, honestly, and I didn't say it when we were talking about it, but I think their best option, honestly, would be to set Joe Burrow this year. And if you can't protect him with an offensive line, don't get him hurt and ruin his career. Yeah, it sucks that he can't play his rookie year and that he won't. He'll be a quote-unquote year behind everyone else. But look at Patrick Mahomes. That kind of worked out. He didn't play for his first year. So I think that Burrow should set just for the fact that he's not going to be safe when he's out on the field. So why would you take the risk of getting him hurt? Kind of like when your running back is in the fourth quarter and you're up by 24 points, why would you be using your starters, your running back, when they could get injured? Why would you take that risk? Same thing here. I think they should set Joe Burrow for the first season and allow somebody else to play and kind of teach him the ropes, bring in a veteran quarterback, teach him the ropes, teach him kind of how to study, how to do all that stuff, but keep him safe at least through his first season, and then they can get the offensive line and all the stuff around him for next season. I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're probably going to just throw him in the flames to see how he does. But Bengals definitely last place. Kind of, I don't see them doing any better than 2 wins. I actually don't expect them to even win 2 games. I'm not sure who they all play this year, but I don't expect much of anything out of the Bengals this year.
And that'll wrap it up for us here on our AFC North Division Preview podcast. We thank everybody for listening. These episodes for a division preview seem to be doing well, and you guys seem to like them. So we thank you for listening. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button, whether you're watching our videos on YouTube or whatever podcast service you use. Please hit the subscribe button. Like I said, we do have a YouTube channel that we've been posting our podcast on and planning on putting some more content over there in the upcoming weeks and months. So if you want to find us on YouTube, go to Slackers Sports Show. And then if you want to follow us on Twitter for links to the podcast episodes when they come out, or stories we find interesting, different things going on in sports that we want you guys to know about, you can find us on Twitter at Slackers Sports.
And that'll do it for another week of podcast. Next week, we'll try to get to you on time. Last Thursday we weren't able to. It's more of a Friday or Saturday episode. But next week we're going to shoot for another Thursday episode of Just the Normal Podcast, and then hit you with another Sunday episode of the AFC South next Sunday. So make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss any of those episodes coming up.